So not too long ago, April and I went on a little game hunt, and I went hoping to find one specific game. And luckily, I found it. I recently played it. I finished it about a week ago, and I've been sitting with it to kind of form my thoughts on it. And I'm ready now to talk to you all about El Shaddai, Ascension of the Metatron. The thing that drew me to this game was actually the concept of its story, because its story is kind of biblically based. And as a Christian myself, I was intrigued. Now I know I'm going to slip up at some point in this video and say biblically based when talking about this game. But I want you to know I don't really mean that exactly how it sounds. What I mean when I say that is that this game uses biblical characters and biblical settings and biblical themes to convey its story. Not that anything it's talking about is actually like canon to the Bible. Most of the ideas in the game, are from the Book of Enoch, which isn't in the modern Bible that's studied today, at least in most of the world. So most Christians see the Book of Enoch really as nothing more than biblical fan fiction. But it goes even further than that by taking the stories in the Book of Enoch, particularly like the first section of the first Book of Enoch, and then changes them up a little bit to fit the narrative structure of a video game. I did write this down so I don't flub it up, so please excuse me as I read off of my computer screen. To oversimplify the premise of the game, the first section of the first Book of Enoch is known as the Book of the Watchers. This book talks about a group of fallen angels who rebelled against God and how they intermingled with humanity and taught them many things about the universe that humanity wasn't supposed to know. The Watchers also had children with the humans, creating beings known as the Nephilim, which were an affront to both heaven and earth. This poisoning of humanity makes God want to rid the world of his creation and is what eventually leads to the story of Noah and the Great Flood. Enoch was Noah's great-grandfather, and canonically he was one of only 2 people who were brought up to heaven without having died. And in the modern canon of the Bible, his story ends there. Enoch is mentioned one other time throughout the entire Bible, and that's right near the end in the Book of Jude. However, the Book of Enoch takes it a lot further. After he is brought to heaven, Enoch is tasked with delivering the message of their fate to the Watchers and basically becomes the mediator between the Watchers and God. The Watchers being the sort of leaders of the group of fallen angels that I mentioned earlier. And this is where the game kind of splits off from the Book of Enoch. So as I mentioned, Enoch was more or less the messenger to the Watchers and the messenger from the Watchers to God. He was kind of like the go-between. Well, in the game, instead of you just delivering the message, you are delivering the punishment. And in the best way that a hack and slash beat 'em up style game can do, that punishment is done through the means of a holy ass kicking. I mentioned before that the existence of the fallen angels is what leads to the Great Flood and the creation of Noah's Ark. Well, in the game, you are given the task of defeating and purifying the Watchers from the earth, and if you do this, then the flood won't happen. You're given the weapons of God, and you are literally tasked with going and beating the hell out of these guys. I don't want to spoil too much of the story other than giving you the game's primary synopsis, which I did already. But honestly, that's kind of okay because you're not really coming to this game for its story. It might interest you like it did me. The game does not do a very good job of telling its story, I think. There were several moments throughout my playthrough of it that I was very confused as to what the actual story was. There was this bit of lore dump between the chapters, but then it's really just go from point A to point B, get from point A to point B, and then we'll tell you things at the end. But then it doesn't do a good job of telling you those things at the end. So yeah, the concept of the game being based around these biblical ideas really drew me in, but then it doesn't really do a lot other than telling you, hey, this is Enoch. Hey, these are the Watchers. Hey, this is the angel Uriel, kind of things, And speaking of the characters, there's one in particular that I want to mention. It was kind of your guide throughout the entire adventure, was this man named Lucifer. And I'm not convinced that wasn't the devil. I did not trust him at all throughout the game. It turned out not to matter. He was fine, but I did not trust him for a second. I thought he was going to turn out to be the final boss of the game because secretly he was the devil. Maybe that was going to be the case if they ever made a second one, but either way, he was fine. Now, I can't talk about this game without talking about its art design and visual style, and holy crap, for a PS3 game from 2011, this is a beautiful game. The scenery has such drastic changes in every chapter. All the backgrounds and everything are this flowing watercolor. it's just remarkably pretty. And that might be one of the reasons why the story was hard to follow. They might have been doing some exposition of something, and all I could pay attention to was what was going on in the backgrounds and everything, because it just looks so dang pretty. If there's one thing that this game definitely did right, it was its art design. So good on you, Ignition. The game was beautiful. The gameplay can best be described as sort of like an action platformer. You have segments of hack and slash beat 'em up stuff, but then between those segments is these different platforming challenges that they want you to go through as you're going through the world of the Watchers. And honestly, the platforming stuff, especially whenever it shifts to be 2D platforming, is probably my favorite sections of the game. As somebody who enjoys platforms, this is like right up the alley of things that I like in games. Especially since one of the weapons they give you kind of acts as a parachute, so it gives you a chance to be more precise with the platforming. And you can also choose not to use that weapon and then not have that safeguard to make the platforming even more challenging. Unfortunately, the 3D platforming sections were a little iffy. The art direction is so dramatically all over the place that it sometimes was hard to tell where you're landing. Even though Enoch does have a shadow to help you land, it still was sometimes difficult to line it up just right, and I fell off things more times than I feel like I should have. The combat in this game was a little simple, in my opinion. You could hit either square or triangle for attack, either X or circle for jump. You had R1 was your block and L1 was your purify. We'll go over purify in a minute. So there's not a lot of like button combo things that you can do, like something you would find in like your Bayonetta or your Devil May Cry. But because they left it so simple on the controller, they give you a means to like extend your combos a bit by like having a rhythm with when you're attacking. Like if you press the button just as the attack lands, it will help extend the combo some. A bit like how Okami did back on the PS2. It's like you're not doing it right if you're just button mashing. Even though it can get you through it, it's not the way it's intended to be done. Another interesting element of the combat is that it actually encourages you to swap weapons. There's 3 weapon types in the game. You have the Arch, which is basically a sword. You have the Gale, which is like this projectile thing. And then you have the Veil, which is like bracers for your hands to make your punches a lot stronger. And it also can act as a shield. They also give you the means of unarmed combat, which is good for whenever your weapon breaks, so that way you can still attack, but it's really bad because it's minimal damage. The punches are very clunky and it just doesn't play right. It just doesn't feel good, which I guess that's the point, because they do really want you to use a weapon. I kind of glossed over it there. Your weapons can break. If you're blocking too much or you get hit with too strong of an attack, your weapon is going to shatter and then you have to go find a new one. And like, I do appreciate this mechanic I'll give you different weapons because they do play very differently and you're able to find one that really fits your play style. But for me personally, I really just stuck with the Arch through most of the game because the Gale felt very underpowered to me and the Veil was just too slow. Like, yes, the Gale lets you stay at a distance and do damage, and the Veil is really strong and gives you a shield. The Arch just seemed to have that balance of let you get some good damage in, but also be able to quickly get away if you need to. And so because of that, I really just stuck with the Arch. And you can tell that was kind of supposed to be the weapon of choice because that's the one that they featured on the box art. There was also a weapon triangle of sorts because, like I said, the enemies use the same weapons that you do. Arches generally were better against the Veil. The Veil was generally better against the Gale, and the Gale was generally better against the Arches. And while that's cool that that's included, it wasn't noticeable enough in the fights to really warrant trading weapons whenever you had an opportunity, whenever you could just keep using the thing that you're comfortable with. I mentioned the purify thing earlier with the weapon, and you do have to do that on occasion. As you're beating down these enemies, you're basically absorbing their vileness from the world and your weapon becomes corrupted. And when your weapon becomes corrupted, it doesn't do near the damage that it does when it's pure. So you really would want to keep your weapon as clean as possible. The problem is your weapon is going to get corrupted mid-fight. So you have to break away from the action, go find a spot that you're kind of safe and where you can spend a few seconds to actually purify your weapon, because that is a full animation that has to go all the way through in order to get your weapon back up to proper fighting strength. And while I didn't like the sound of that at first, whenever it actually got into the game and started using it, it didn't feel as annoying as I thought it was going to, and it actually makes a lot of sense within the narrative of what's going on. So while it sounds like a turnoff for the game, it's not a big deal. The other thing you could do mid-fight if your weapon becomes corrupted is you can actually steal the weapons from the enemies, because the enemies use the same weapons that you do. If you hit them enough times, they'll kind of get stunned and give you an opportunity to steal their weapon. which would make them unarmed, making them a lot easier to deal with, and would also give you a freshly purified weapon. And whenever you steal a weapon from an enemy, the game kind of pauses to let you do your purify stuff. So that's a good way to definitely get a fresh weapon, because the game will pause and let you have it. Whereas purifying the weapon you already have in your hand takes a few seconds and you can get knocked out of that process. And that's not even mentioning the fact that you can attack while blocking to do these like special moves, which make the combat just that little bit more fun. I know I've said a lot about the combat, but I just want to say, like, the combat to me was kind of just fine. Like, there was a little bit of variance you could get from it, but each weapon didn't have enough variance. The idea is you're going to be changing weapons basically every chance you get, but because the weapons play so differently, once you get kind of comfortable with one, you're going to want to stick with that one. And so the combat can start to feel a little stale if you play that way, which is a bummer for me, because that is kind of how I played. Aside from the couple of times where it actually requires you to swap weapons, then the arch is what felt most comfortable to me, and that's the one that I wanted to use most of the time. Not a problem with the game per se, but that's a problem with my experience of it. One more thing on the combat is there's no HUD in this game. So the way you know whenever you are low on health is actually how much armor you have on. Whenever you start, you're basically in full armor. You've got all of this white plate all over your body, and the less of that you have on there, the lower your health is, until you get to the point where you have no armor on and the only thing you're wearing is your pants. And then if you take one more hit, you lose. One cool thing about this game, though, is that they actually give you the option of coming back from death, quote unquote, whenever you get that hit and you collapse and you're about to get your game over. If you just like spam every button on the controller, you will actually be able to come back into the fight at about half health, I would say. Every time you lose after that, you have to like press the buttons more times for it to count. And you can do this 3 or 4 times. It gives you a means to recover if you do something dumb and get right back into the fight. But speaking of armor, there's just one thing I really want to bring up real quick. I just find it really funny that they decided to make Enoch this like Abercrombie model. This soldier of God who's going to go beat the crap out of fallen angels, then what kind of outfit does he need to be wearing into the fight? You got the armor of God, which is a nice touch, but then outside of that, you got no shirt and skinny jeans. And like the jeans were very prominent throughout everything. Like when you had full armor on, you could see the jeans. When you did not have your full armor, you could see the jeans. And it just is really funny to me that this soldier of God chose to wear skinny jeans into battle. It honestly felt to me like there was some kind of brand deal. Like I was kind of expecting to, once I finished the game and the credits started rolling, I wouldn't have been surprised at all to see like this big old sponsored by Levi jeans in the credits somewhere. Now, when I say this next thing, it's going to sound like I didn't like the game, which I don't want it to sound that way, because I do actually like it. Well, one of this game's strongest points is that it's actually kind of short. And I don't mean that in a way against the game, like, oh, thank God it's so short so that way you can get in, get out, and you don't have to think about it anymore. It's good that the game's short, because the combat is, like I said, the combat's kind of mid, and the game and the story itself is all over the place. And those things spread over 15, 20, 30 hours, it would get boring eventually, and you would probably not finish it. I finished this game in like 9 hours. They actually want you to know that it's not going to be a long game, because early in the game, Lucifer actually tells you, I mentioned him before, like he's kind of your guide through the game. He talks directly to the player sometimes. He's not talking to Enoch, he's talking to you as the player. And he actually said early on in the game, you could beat this in about 7 hours if you're good enough, which is very funny to me. It's like they want you to know that some of the things in this game you might not appreciate, but don't worry, it's not very long, so power through, buddy. You'll get to the end soon enough. And he says this at the start of the game. And I did appreciate this game, because it's something that's surprisingly hard to find nowadays, is something that's both talking about Christianity, even in as loose of a way as this game is, and not be either making Christianity the downfall of the story of the characters, like in some of Stephen King's works, or say the show Midnight Mass, but also it then still being good. A lot of the media that I've seen that is produced to be Christian is also kind of bad. It's corny, it's hokey, it's trying its best to take the religion very seriously, instead of doing like we do with everything, where you can poke fun at something, you can tell a fictional story about something and still respect the core material. And that's something that I feel like this actually does a good job at. Even though this is not telling the stories that are in the Christian faith, it's taking these ideas from these Christian offshoots and still portraying them with respect. It's not using the characters and making a mockery of things. It is actually trying to be, it's still actually trying to be some level of respectful to the core religion. It even has a little disclaimer talking about that whenever you boot up the game. So something like that I do appreciate. And while this isn't specifically talking about something that's in my faith, I do appreciate that they took it seriously. I think that's about all I want to say about it. If any of this intrigues you, I do recommend you give the game a shot. There's a PS3 version and an Xbox 360 version. From what I've heard, the PS3 version runs better, but the Xbox 360 version is a lot cheaper. Like the PS3 one is about a $40 game, I think, but the 360 version I think is only like $15. If you can deal with the game performing worse, then you can have it for really cheap. And also, this game recently got a remaster. I think only like 2 years ago, maybe. Let me look that up. It's only been a year. So back last April, this game got a release of a remaster. I think it might just be digital only. It looks like the remaster got a limited run release on the Switch. And so do with that what you will. So the game is accessible if you want to give it a shot. It's available. You can track down the original release, or you can get the remaster digitally on basically anything now. So yeah, if you liked the concept of this, then give it a shot. It's short, so it's probably worth your time. But I think that's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked the video, make sure to hit that like button. And if you like what I do here, then hit subscribe, because that does help me out a lot. And I hope you look forward to even more Game Talk videos just like this one as the days go on. So again, thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one. Have a good one, y'all.